No country in the history of the world, faced with threats comparable to those faced by Israel, has ever had a better record of human rights, a better record of compliance with the rule of law, and more concern with the lives of civilians, even civilians who identify and help Israel's enemies. I challenge anyone to name a country that has had a better record. Is Israel's record perfect? No, far from it. And it can do better. But when you compare it to any other country in the world, including my own, the United States, there is simply no comparison, particularly when you think of the fact that Israel's enemies hide among civilians, fire their rockets from civilian areas deliberately in order to induce Israel to kill their civilians. They don't build shelters for their civilians. They build shelters only for their terrorist fighters. Israel, on the other hand, builds shelters only for its civilians. Its fighters are fighting in the open, generally, and taking risks to their own lives. And so Israel's fight against terrorism is done with a high sense of morality. And again, don't believe me. Justice Brennan, who was probably the most liberal justice ever to serve on the United States Supreme Court, came to Israel some years ago at the invitation of then President Aaron Barak of the Israel Supreme Court. This was just before 9/11. And when he came back to America, he said, if God forbid terrorism were ever to come to our shores, there's only one country from which we could learn how to balance human rights against the fight against terrorism, and that country is Israel. So Israel should not be defensive when it comes to the way it fights against terrorism. It can teach the world how to fight terrorism. It can teach the world how to reduce civilian casualties. It can teach the world how to make phone calls and drop leaflets in advance of bombings so that civilian casualties are minimized. And again, I issue my challenge here as I've issued it elsewhere. Name any other country in the history of the world faced with threats comparable to those faced by Israel, which has had a better record of human rights. You cannot name any such country because there is none.
Thank you for watching JerusalemOnline.com news, produced by Channel 2 News, Israel's leading news source. You can receive free updates to your email starting tomorrow. All you have to do is register at www.JerusalemOnline.com. JerusalemOnline.com news, your link to Israel.